Welcome to AASHTO Resource Q&A. We're taking time to discuss construction materials testing and inspection with people in the know, from exploring testing problems and solutions to laboratory best practices and quality management. We're covering topics important to you.
Hey, this is Brian Johnson from AASHTO Resource.
And I'm Kim Swanson, and this is part 2 of our series on the changes to AASHTO R18-26. You can listen to part 1 that was already out. You can watch the whole recorded video, which is on our YouTube channel. But here we go with part 2. So I know another section that had updated information on it and some changes were made were the document control section. So you can tell us a little bit more about what changes were made and why.
Sure. So standards are required to be available for use by the laboratory. And over the years, we've seen a lot of people not do that. So they will only get the standards so much so that they can show that they are getting through the assessment. So they'll get, okay, well, do you have this standard? Well, no, but let me scramble and see if somebody I know has it and can share it with me. That's not good for quality of laboratory. They need to have a system in place where they get the standards updated regularly. They review them. Their staff knows what the changes are when there are relevant changes. This has been a huge gap, I would say, in laboratory quality for the laboratories that we have had in our program. Not all of them, of course, but I'd say the majority of them have struggled with this. And part of this was based on the move from the old way of printing books. And every year, sort of like when we used to get phone books. Like every year, the book comes out. They order the book, it shows up, they can kind of see, oh, I wonder what changed. And then they can train people on it. But when we got away from the physical books, people just kind of lost control or containment of that process. And so some of the ASTMs will come out, periodically. There might be 2-3 revisions a year for something if there were some mistakes made in a ballot or something. And then AASHTO still is the once a year update, so that's a little bit easier to keep track of. But then they also didn't keep track of okay, we don't, not only do we have a process, we don't even do it anymore. We don't even get the standards anymore. So now it's more clear. It says, they have to maintain standards acquired through purchase or authorized licensing for use by testing personnel. The wording is different than it used to be for this, and it's more enforceable and it's more clear about what they need to do.
All right, now moving on to the next section, that was section 5.2. So section 5.3, organization, there seems to be a change in that too. Can you go over that?
This section has gotten more clear about 2 things. One is that laboratories need to identify, any parent or child relationship they have with other companies. If they're a subsidiary of a subsidiary of a subsidiary, which happens, then they need to define that. One of the objectives of that is we want to make sure that people are really clear about who the company is. And this is something that we keep track of for accreditation purposes because we want to make public that information as much as we can. Again, we've talked about this before. We work for the DOTs ultimately. We're providing a service for DOTs, for other entities that use our accreditation program. And when they are hiring somebody, they need to know information about that to make sure that there is not some sort of conflict of interest out there between either the QA and QC laboratories, or make sure that all of the companies bidding on this project are subsidiaries of the same company. That presents a risk to them that they need to look at as far as what kind of bids they're getting. So while they may not be digging into the QMS, it's a way for somebody to easily see what's going on with that. And I will say that with all the conglomeration that's been going on over the years with these testing firms, I will say that they are largely transparent about this. Like we haven't seen too many cases where they're trying to hide these relationships. So I don't think this is going to be hard for people to do. So that's defined in there. And the other one is that the organizational chart is more limited to relevant technical staff. It used to just kind of say everybody that works in your company should be on the org chart, but we never really enforced that. We only really want to see the relevant people to the laboratory operations. And so now it just says that. So it's just kind of confirming what we've already done.
Also in section 5, we go to section 5.4, staffing. I think you talked a little bit about position descriptions a little bit earlier, but why don't you go ahead and describe some of the changes that were made and maybe some of the benefits or why the rationale behind them.
The two big ones are the position descriptions now say required skills, education, and experience where relevant. So they can kind of customize those the way they want. The other one is we used to have this weird thing called a biographical sketch that everyone was confused by. You would get pictures of people, you would get narratives about their life, like they're writing their autobiography. You would get all, you would also get like resumes, like they're applying for a job.
Yeah.
So that term has been removed, and now it just says that they basically have to document this somewhere. So it's still education, work experience, certification, and licensures where relevant. But it can exist in any form they want. It doesn't have to be in something called a biographical sketch that people don't know what that term means.
Yeah.
And we think this will help people not be confused.
Yeah.
It's really the same requirement. If you're already accredited, you don't have to change anything unless you want. But we're just trying to get rid of that term because no one really liked it that much.
The next update in section 5, 5.5, is technical training and competency. What were some of the changes there?
This was pretty minor. The first one, and this goes for training and competency evaluation. Nothing has changed as far as the technicians have to be trained or evaluated on everything that they perform normally, right? The only difference is that the person doing the training or competency evaluation has to be familiar with the activity. Now, again, this is one of those things that does not change what most people are doing. It just provides clarification if you've never done it before. Because we do get new labs that say, how am I going to do this? Who can do this? And it's like, well, somebody just has to be familiar, and then the question, how familiar do they have to be?
Yeah.
Well, that's up for you to decide. Like, we're not going to decide that for you because that language is extremely vague and it's just to be helpful. But now the other thing that is a bigger change.
Yes.
And this was the one that came with much discussion and compromise is a requirement for anybody who performs standardizations, calibrations, checks, or maintenance in the laboratory has to be trained on how they do those activities. That seems like a very sensible thing to do, right? Like instead of just saying, hey, go standardize that piece of equipment or go check that equipment. And then they have to guess what that means and what they have to do. You actually say, here's how you do it. And I'm going to show you how to do it. And this is how you document it on this form. Why this is important is because this is one of the most falsified types of equipment or types of records that we see in the entire QMS. The two big ones are training and competency and equipment records. So one way to help avoid what is most commonly referred to as pencil whipping the records or just falsifying, making up numbers and putting them on a sheet is to teach the person how to do it properly. And that is the extent of this requirement. There are no records required for this to show training. Yes, your eyebrows are raised because that is unusual to have a requirement that specifically says that records are not required. That was the compromise that was made in this in this ballot, is that if we were going to be able to put this in here, we had to say no records were required because there were some implications in the minds of some of the people who are voting on this that to provide a training record equates to developing a certification program. I have never experienced this, but I will take their word for it that that is what happens because it's not hard for me to believe that somebody could take a simple concept and complicate it in that setting. But it was really it's as simple as just showing somebody how to do that.
So is there a is it required that a procedure is in the QMS about doing that?
No. This is a very a very simple requirement. This is we are trying to solve a problem without having an administrative requirement accompanying it. So it is a little unusual the way it's worded, and I think it's worth it because it is such a problem. I mean,
I know this has been a passion area for you for a while. I know, so I'm glad you have something now in the standard that helps clarify that for people. So we'll see how this evolves over time as well.
Yes, yeah, this was definitely a bucket list item for me, which is sad. Most people have bucket lists like I want to go to some exotic location. I'm like, no,
but
I want to get this requirement in R18.
I mean, to each their own, Brian, to each their own. We did talk a little bit earlier about customer complaints as it relates to the terminology section, but in section 5.7, there was more clarification around that.
That's right. Yeah. So now customer complaints has its own special section. It used to be just kind of embedded in, I think it was during a management review, they had to discuss customer complaints. But now they have to have a procedure on when responding to documented customer complaints, the records and resulting actions taken to address the complaints. This is a special phrase in here that are determined to be valid by the laboratory shall be maintained. So people say all kinds of things, right? And this customer complaint requirement allows the laboratory to determine if those are valid and if they need to have corrective action associated with them. And I think most people that deal with customer complaints kind of go through that process one way or another to determine like, okay, is this a credible complaint? And do we need to take corrective action or is this just noise?
Section 5.8, that had some changes as well.
So internal audits and management reviews have always been confusing areas. So we tried to really differentiate the two this time. So internal audits have a lot of details now about like what exactly needs to be included in the internal audit. When it's done, that's still 12 months. And you still have to evaluate your quality management system for compliance with the requirements. And then you kind of do an audit of the implementation. So this is something that larger companies that have multiple offices can do. They can do that audit of their general policies and procedures one time and do the implementation audits at all the locations. If you're a single laboratory, you kind of do them both at the same time. But one of the things that has changed in this section, other than the details, are that the person performing the audit has to be trained. So this is very similar to that training we just talked about in the other section. It used to say the auditor needs to be trained and independent of the activity being audited where possible. Well, over the years, we've learned that where possible is just about everywhere.
You mentioned that there's always confusion between internal audits and management reviews. So in section 5.9, the management review section, what has changed there and why?
Well, the definition, the first line of it has changed a lot. Now it says the quality manager shall meet with top management. So that tells you right away that it's not an audit. And then it goes to define what needs to be covered in that. And they have to have a policy on how this is conducted. That's kind of a new thing. And then there are a bunch of requirements about what needs to be documented in it. So it should be much more clear to people if they read it that it's not the internal audit. But before it was like, I understand why people were confused by it because it seemed like the language used in both of those sections there was some overlap.
Yeah.
And it was hard to tell when one ends and the other one begins, or if it should be one process.
Yeah.
So now it's a little bit more differentiated, like it should have been.
Thanks for listening to part 2. We will come back in a couple days or next week, who knows, with part 3 to finish up the series.
Thanks for listening to AASHTO Resource Q&A. If you'd like to be a guest or just submit a question, send us an email at podcast@ashtoresource.org or call Brian at 240-436-4820. For other news and related content, check out AASHTO Resource's social media accounts or go to ashtoresource.org.